You see, what we're talking about here is an organism that imitates other life forms, and it imitates them perfectly. When this thing attacked our dogs, it tried to digest them, absorb them, and in the process shape its own cells to imitate them.
In there. It's weird and pissed off, whatever it is.
Hello, and welcome to Comic Book Bears Presents The Bear Cave of Terror. I'm your hairy, heavy homo and horror fan host, Steve Morey. Each week here in the Bear Cave, I invite a horror-loving guest who brings with them one of their favorite scary movies. It can be classic, gory, trashy, obscure, well-known, or something probably still banned in Britain. In other words, a thrilling work of cinematic terror that we think you might enjoy. In each episode, we'll dig into the flesh and bone of the film, highlighting our favorite scary moments, as well as stories and details from beyond the screen, all while our guest imparts their deep and possibly concerning love for this week's frightful vision unto you, our dear listener. And joining me here in the Bear Cave is Mr. Lindus. Will, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here in the cave. It's dark here. It's scary here in the cave, but that's how we like it, right?
Yes. Purpley. It's purpley here, at least in this part of the side of the cave.
Yeah. Ooh, what's lurking beyond? We'll find out.
Well, also there is a sleeping beagle, so that might be part of that too. So it's very creepy. And
wait, do we know it's a beagle?
Ooh.
No, so here's the thing. Yeah.
But welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And so tell us a little bit about yourself, like horror movies, movies in general. What do you do around movies?
What do I do around movies? So, we are part of what I think we've long considered ourselves sort of like a sister program to the Comic Book Bears, at the Movie Bears podcast, which I'm one of the three hosts of. And so each week, most weeks, we review some sort of film, usually something current in cinemas. Sometimes it's sort of a throwback, always with sort of a, huggable homo approach to it, right? Because that's our point of view. That's our angle. All three of us on the show have our different likes, but genre film, specifically horror film, has always been one of my sweet spots. Growing up, that was the thing. My mother and I would rent horror movies at we would go down to our local, it was before Blockbuster even, we'd go to our local rental shop and we would just look at whatever was on the wall. Sometimes it was something that had just come out. It was always a VHS. We rented the Nightmare on Elm Street series a billion times growing up. That was my childhood. Was watching these horror movies and just sort of absorbing them and sometimes being scared of them, but often being just fascinated by them because these are stories of human beings going through the worst, most terrifying, most arduous thing, facing something, the thing that lurks under the bed, the monster that's in the closet, and sometimes coming out ahead of that. And I don't know that I necessarily understood all of that when I was a kid. I think what I appreciated the fun and the scares and the kills and all of that. But as I've grown and as I've matured, I still have that love for horror movies for that same reason. So yeah, I'm glad to be on the show today to talk about horror, to talk about some of those experiences, and to talk about the film that I brought to the Bear Cave, and that is 1982's John Carpenter's The Thing.
The Thing. I absolutely love The Thing. I am so excited that you brought it here because this is one of those movies that I saw when I was younger and, getting to experience a movie channel on cable. It probably came on, HBO or Cinemax during a free preview weekend or something like that. And that was how I first saw it. And it just blew my mind just how cool and wild and just thrilling that this film was.
Oh, 100%. It's one of those films that I think has aged remarkably well. There are movies that I remember loving growing up, and then you watch them as an adult and you're just like, oh, they said that. Oh, they got away with that. And you understand that it's the time, you understand all of those things. But going back and rewatching The Thing, the themes in that film, the effects, the performances, the overall story, I mean, it's hard to find a place to knock this film. It's not one that I necessarily had as part of my everyday growing up type. I think I came into The Thing a little bit later, more towards probably like junior high school is kind of when I got into The Thing. We were more of like kind of like slashers and B creature features with me and my mother watching stuff at the rental store. But The Thing is first of all, it's part of this era of films, you know, and we were talking a little bit about it off air, but about 1982, just how like wonderfully cinematic that year was, how it brought a lot of great things to the forefront. It's also the year I was born. This movie came out like This movie was born in theaters about a month and a half before I was. So I have an affinity for it for that. I feel like 1982 is a very, very good year. I want to say, too, that another element that makes this movie so exciting for me is another one of my loves, and that's I love mysteries. I love murder mystery, whodunit type stuff. I love even some of the stuff that's like the social deduction style games, like Blood on the Clock Tower is a big one that's pretty popular right now, or like, you know, the previous versions of that, which would have been like Mafia or Werewolf or things along those lines.
Right.
Or even television shows like The Traitors or anything like that, where you have people trying to figure out who's what and who's who and what roles people are. That's a big element of The Thing, and I think one of the things that it does so effectively is that, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about it because you can't not, but there is no definitive guide to the who's and the what's of this. There's certainly things that we see on screen. We see and experience those moments, but at the end of the day, we're still left with some of that mystery so that we can carry that film with us in our psyches, in our conversations, in, you know, sitting across like a bar with someone and having a beer, you know, 40 years later and wondering, you know, hey, do you think McCready or Childs was actually a thing at the end, or a human? And we can have those conversations without being able to point to like this one interview that dispels the conversation. I love that. I love conversations that extend beyond the film watching experience.
Absolutely. And I think this one really does lend itself to ongoing mysteries. You know, the ending notwithstanding, I mean, the ending, of course, is famous for being ambiguous and initiating a lot of rumor and conspiracy over the years on who actually knows what really happened and all that. And John Carpenter has always stated that he knows exactly what both Childs and McCready, which one is the alien, if either of them, and he's not going to tell. And so the fact that he says that means that there is something that's definitive out there, but of course nobody has any real idea. They all have theories. We all have theories.
We all have theories.
We all have theories. And the fact that this movie is now 43 years old as of this year. So it's a 43-year-old movie. It's been around, and for 43 years, people have been asking these same questions. And there's other mysteries, too, throughout the movie that aren't specifically answered. Fortunately or unfortunately, if you enjoyed the prequel, those filmmakers attempted to answer some of those mysteries. What happened to the Norwegian team and the Norwegian camp? What happened with the spaceship? You know, all of these other items that came up that you kind of have to take for granted in this original film. You know, how did this happen? How long did it take? How many people were involved previously? Why were those two Norwegians? How did they know that the dog was not really a dog at the beginning? Like, what drove them to that? But it's really, this movie just has it all, and can't wait to get into it. So why don't you grace us with a synopsis of the film for those people who haven't seen it, which there are plenty out there, or people who haven't seen it in a while and just kind of want to refresh themselves on what it's about.
Absolutely. So The Thing is set with this research station in Antarctica. and the team there, isolated, cut off from the outside world by an encroaching storm and communications that have been spotty at best, find themselves beset by this alien life form that has the ability to absorb the traits of anything that its cells come into contact with and devours, and then take on its form to the point where you don't know if the person sitting next to you is your friend and coworker or another one of the things that is posing as such. And so that's the basic conceit of this. The beagle sitting behind you could be an assimilation monster just waiting for the cameras to come off so that it can take over. Don't let that bother you, Steve, while we're chatting here. Don't look over your shoulder. You're fine.
I'm sure I'm perfectly all right.
Few points about this film. This is a John Carpenter film, not at the very beginning of his career, but definitely towards the beginning of it. This is, after Halloween. This is after The Fog, which was 1980, but still very early in that kind of like, he's not at the point where he has like his own ticket to do whatever he wants in Hollywood, but he does start to have the resources to kind of pull in a few names, including stars at the time. Kurt Russell and Wilford Brimley would have been kind of the two bigger names in this. Also, I won't say unknown, but like a lesser known actor at the time, Keith David, who would later on become someone that is a super well known. This is also notably one of the few early films that Carpenter did not do the score for, or at least not entirely. He reached out to
Ennio Morricone.
Yeah, Ennio Morricone to do who's known for like spaghetti westerns and sort of like that style thing. And a lot of those stingers and score comes from him, with a little bit of Carpenter providing some like the interstitial stuff, some of the bridging stuff. And even the fun trivia there is sort of knowing that some of those unused tracks ended up showing up in Tarantino's The Hateful Eight. And so there's a neat little connection between those movies that way, which also had the spaghetti western connection. Most notably of this film, though, so we can talk about the directors, we can talk about the stars, and we should talk about all of those things, but I think the thing that this movie has seared into my brain are its practical makeup effects. This is one of the last major films to use almost exclusively, save for like an opening sequence, save for a couple things, to use practical makeup effects. We started to get into the computer era very shortly after. Not to say that no practical effects were ever used again. That's not a true statement. But gosh, the special effects in this are one of the stars. Rob Bottin, who did the effects and make work on this, is just absolutely at a master class here. He's done some memorable work, but I feel like this is definitely like his gold standard, slam dunk. Like, if anyone has a piece of work that is so consequential to the overall landscape of the field that they're in as Bottin, the point where it would be on their epitaph, it would be the first thing mentioned in their eulogy. I feel like The Thing is that for Rob Bottin.
I 100% agree. I think, in terms of magnum opus kind of labels, I think this film for Rob Bottin and the special effects group that he put together to build the practical effects for this movie, absolutely, I think this set the gold standard for science fiction and horror makeup effects just in this one film. And he was very young when he was on this movie. He was 23 when he got brought on. And before that, he had worked with Carpenter for The Fog a little bit. That's where he had met him. But he had also done Howling. He worked briefly with the original Star Wars back, the werewolf in the original cantina scene. That was his. And unfortunately, it was subsequently cut, I think, in the special edition, so you don't necessarily see it anymore. But that's kind of where he cut his teeth, very literally, as a young man, and now heading up basically the entire special effects department for this film. And because he was so young, and because there was so much demand for the work on this movie, he ended up working. I think there was a point he was working 7 days a week. Sleeping at the studio at Universal. He just basically put in all this time, and by the end of the movie had to be hospitalized from exhaustion, because he worked like crazy on this. But so did everybody else. I mean, he brought everything that he could out of his team. They even brought in Stan Winston very briefly for one of the major effects earlier in the film, with the dog creature that's been created in the dog kennel that pulls itself up and has the sort of half transformed dog head that comes out and splits open and all these things. That was a Stan Winston creation, and the fact that it fits in so well with everything else, with all the other alien sort of transformation effects, is just a testament to how well these were planned and thought out and designed. And one little bit of weird trivia here: when he first came to John Carpenter and was talking about what he wanted for this movie, he wanted to not have the alien look like one thing. He wanted to have the alien represent every other creature or species that it had assimilated at some point in its trek across the galaxy thousands of years ago. And so in order to get that together, Carpenter sent him to go work with Mike Ploog, who was doing storyboarding for Universal and done a lot of storyboards for several different movies by that point. But he's also well known for comic book fans as the first artist for Werewolf by Night. Poking up over here. And, he worked on Ghost Rider. He worked on Man-Thing. He was the go-to monster guy for Marvel for several years in the late 70s. And then he switched and went to go work on movies. But between Mike Ploog and Rob Bottin, they came up with all sorts of wild designs and storyboarded it out and brought it back to John Carpenter. He's like, can you do this? If you can, absolutely, let's do this.
And that's what's so fun about this production is there are a lot of these stories where, I mean, obviously Carpenter is at the helm, so he's making the decisions as you are with your director working on this type of film. But there were a lot of collaborative elements where he went with sort of the improv mentality of yes and. So you mentioned Rob Bottin, this 23-year-old who, yes, had done some work before, even with Carpenter, but to be able to allow this guy to say, hey, I'm going to make your production more complicated by making a lot of scenes that are going to require you to change what you're thinking about with your lighting, to change how your actors are going to be interacting with the scenes, because we want this monster to have this cosmic horror feel of all of these different things that have been absorbed over time. And for Carpenter to say, yeah, let's do it. There is a character in this movie who goes by the name of Windows, played by Thomas G. Waits. And one of the things that was so fun, sort of like reading up on some of the actor stories about, how they got the roles and what they originally did, was he came on and his original character was not named Windows, but he had these like glasses with these green frames that he wore, and he put those on and he decided his character was going to be called Windows. And he was really kind of getting like in this sort of method spot with this. And he went to Carpenter, and all the other actors, by the way, hate this. All the other actors are kind of like saying just like, come on, like, especially like kind of Russell and Wilford Brimley, who are, a little more old salt at this point, have done a few things, but just like, you can perform what's on page, perform it on screen. But this young actor is just like kind of going in wild places. And instead of just being squashed, Carpenter said, yeah, I like it. Let's go with it. And so now he's Windows in the movie. It's Windows to the point where I don't know what else that character's name is. He's Windows. When they test his blood sample, they put Windows on the side of it. So I just think that's such a neat little element to Carpenter's like approach with this film. Even the opening title screen, where the black screen and the thing kind of being burned on, they wanted to do an homage to the classic The Thing, and so they basically just let the team get a fish tank, get some like garbage bags and some KY jelly to light some things on fire and burn things, and just burn a bunch of these things through and down until they got the plate that they want. Because you can't just go into like After Effects like you can now and just say, let's do a burn effect, turn it up by a saturation of 20 or what have you. They had to like get creative, actually burning something until they got the take that they wanted. That's the magic of movies, and it's part of why, like, there's this quote that goes around, every movie is a miracle, and I truly believe that. Like, you can't have this many people come together from this many different disciplines and create some sort of story that appears on screen without it being some sort of magical work of art. And that's even for bad movies, I'd say. But for great movies, and The Thing is a great movie, it almost feels like unbelievable that these people were able to pull off all of these things and get the final product that they did, because you know that there's stuff on the cutting room floor. You know that there's stuff that didn't go the way they wanted it to, and they had to improvise. That's every part of movie magic, is sort of like doing the best you can with what you've got, planning for what you can, improvising around what you can't, fixing some of that in edit. But it feels so intentional. Every part of it feels so intentional, and that's the magic here.
100%. And Carpenter did it with such a great team of people that he put together. You've got John Lloyd as the productions designer. You've got Dean Cundy as the DP. He was somebody that he worked with on Halloween, and The Fog and Escape from New York, which came right before this. So, they knew each other and can work really well with each other to understand how to light this and how to frame this and how to shoot this to make it look great. And they had it up in, I believe it was Stewart, BC, was the on location that they had for the base. So the base, instead of being obviously in Antarctica, they couldn't go film there. They found the next closest thing, which is, on the border of Alaska. There's this sort of mining town, and they were able to sort of shoot up in this area around where a mine was, working and doing business. So there's lots of really cool stories about them going up and down the hill, and having to be in constant radio contact with the mining company so they didn't get run off the single lane road and off a mountain by trucks that were coming down. But also the fact that here's this beautiful, cold and snowy area, and it's just this really intense sort of camaraderie that occurs as well, because all the production team, all of the actors, everybody's living up there. So they're living in the town of Stewart, and then right across the border in the Alaskan town, they had this barge that was floated in that they all got to live dorm style for, several weeks or, for however long they needed to. And it's this really great tale of when you bring a great group of people together to make a film, you're all in it together, and you create this wonderful thing that's truly the sum of all of the parts, and all the parts are mostly the people that are doing all of these incredible things to bring out this, an hour and 40 minutes of just terror, fantasy, science fiction, suspense, paranoia, just all rolled together in what eventually became known as a masterpiece or as a classic. But you talked about the opening titles. Susan Turner was the person who ended up, or I believe her last name now is Frank, but Susan Turner built the spaceship. Put all of the lights together, had like 100 some lights and all these things, and like mocked up all the programming so that the lights could shine and spin in whatever kind of sequence they needed. They shot multiple takes on it so they could composite all together and create for literally something that is 5 seconds long, 10 seconds long. Beautiful model, by the way. I was able to, in one of the documentaries I watched, they actually had Susan Turner still has it.
She still has it. Yeah.
It's
Of
gorgeous.
course, if I made something that like was in such a masterpiece, again, even if, I would keep that forever, I that would not be going up for like auction or sell. That would be something that I would have in my collection forever.
It would be the centerpiece on my dining room table all year long. The tablescape is around the spaceship.
Yeah, we're all going to eat out of our own food that we prepared ourselves out of cans at our
course.
section of the table around the centerpiece. Yeah.
Yes. But and you brought up the actors. Windows, the actor who played Windows, great character. And I think everybody, because there were this film has 12 men on screen. Plus, there was the one Norwegian who survived for a very short period of time.
Yeah.
At the beginning. But these 12 men had to act together, had to know each other, had to be comfortable with each other, and I think it's a testament to the writing. Burt Lancaster's son, I think.
Yeah,
who wrote the
wild.
script. Yeah. He did a good job sort of writing the characters, but it was up to the actors to go ahead and really flesh them out and embody them in a way where you could tell all of them apart right away. And I mean, we've got a bunch of meaty white dudes with beards. Sometimes it can be hard to tell us apart.
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes. But I think, this group of actors did such a great job. And like you said, you've got the Kurt Russell, the Wilford Brimleys, who are the established, well-known, recognizable. Although Wilford does not have his mustache at all, which is wild. Like, you see him clean shaven. But and you've got Kurt Russell with the full beard, looking all, Snake Plissken without the eye patch. And you've got Keith David, of course, in his first major movie role. You've got Richard Mazer, who puts in a wonderful performance as I like to call him Dog Daddy.
He is the Dog Daddy. Yeah,
he is the Dog Daddy. But Carter is the character name, who not only is played as a loner, as somebody who doesn't feel or appear comfortable with the other men and is more comfortable with the dogs, also puts an extremely red herring type of performance. I mean, here's a character that already looks shifty, already looks suspicious, that the other people are paranoid about already because he spent all this time with the dog, who eventually, is revealed to be sort of the carrier of the thing. But it turns out that he's not. He hasn't been infected. Yeah. When he gets shot and killed, he dies because he is not. He was not assimilated at any point in time, which is a shock to, I think, the audience as well as the other characters who were there. Are like, oh, we were sure that he must have been turned at some point, but he never was. Which makes kind of his death a little bit tragic, as well as the deaths of all the other dogs. My God, I think.
Yeah. You're a dog daddy. I'm a dog daddy. I work in the veterinary field. It's hard to watch, wonderful little puppers, biting it, but it's there's no punches pulled here, And I think that's part of what makes it effective. The same with the paranoia side of things. A good murder mystery for me needs to have compelling red herrings, right?
Right.
You need to be able to think that, well, technically anyone is a suspect. It's not fun when we see right at the beginning, okay, it's probably this person, and now we're just waiting for the shoe to drop. With The Thing, we're watching all of these moments and we are succumbing to the paranoia and the suspicion as much as the characters are at the same rate that the characters are. We're looking for moments in the background saying, like, aha, it's probably him, or, oh, I bet it's this, I bet it's that. And so when they start to turn on each other, start to distrust one another, start to lash out against one another, it feels natural because we are there too, because those actors are pulling us into that.
There are apparently some clues with how certain scenes are shot, that there's no light on somebody's eyes when they've already been assimilated or infected. And if you watch the movie back multiple times, like we have, you can see those moments before those people then turn. But it's not 100%. There are still surprises and still, clues that are not picked up on who's infected. Very early on in the movie, when Jed, the dog, who as a canine actor is actually half wolf.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. And Richard Mazer, of course, talks very, very deeply about how much love he had for this canine actor. But there's a moment where Jed is sort of wandering through the base, and you see in shadow he walks into somebody's bedroom, and the person's shadow turns to confront the dog, and you assume at that point that that person is being assimilated or has been infected. You don't know who that is ever. I mean, we can suspect maybe it was Palmer. Maybe that's when Norris was infected, because he apparently did not know, or at least didn't outwardly show that he knew that he was infected until that awesome heart attack
Assimilation. Oh, yeah.
Can we talk about that? Can we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It just, I mean, talking about like Rob Bottin and his team, this was just amazing. Charles Hallahan, who played the character of Norris, he talks extensively about this in an interview that he had shortly before he passed away in Terror Takes Shape, where he was so shocked by how good the prosthetic was. Because basically, when he's there on that table, the only thing that's him is his head, like the tops of his shoulders and his arms. That's it. Everything else is silicone and rubber and all of that stuff, including every single individual chest hair. And he talks about how detailed it was that he was shocked by how much it looked like him. He's like, I've looked at my body for 50 years. I know what my body looks like. And that was my body, even though it definitely wasn't. And he also talks about how he fooled some of his fellow cast members into thinking that it was him lying on that table. They didn't realize that he was technically just in the box below the table, sticking out, on top. And until they got really close, because from a distance, it looked so real. And then, of course, the effect of the chest cavity opening up into these giant teeth and then clamping into, Copper, the Doc's arms, ripping them off. That was cool, too, because the arms were themselves made of jelly. They were jelly prosthetics. With wax bones, and they got a stand-in who was an amputee. Mm-hmm. So they attached those jelly arms essentially to the stand-in, had his arms in there, and the mechanism closes and rips those things off. It's just so fantastic. It looked so good. The work that they put into this looks so good.
There are two sort of like money shot moments of this film. There's probably more. You mentioned the kennel scene. That's in there too. But one of them is the chest cavity defib scene, like you just mentioned. That is such a startling moment, and it keeps going. Because we have the effect of the chest opening up. Richard Dysart, Copper, now he's replaced with the amputee stand-in, but at the same time, we're getting that performance out of him. Now he's out. He's out of the picture too. All the other characters, this is in the middle of a standoff where MacReady was like, yeah, I will blow us all to hell if you guys come near me. So all of this is happening. And then all of a sudden, Norris's alien head pops off and starts skittering across the floor. And there is a moment where Palmer basically just looks over and says, what the fuck is that? Or something to that effect. And mind you, he is infected at this point. But that line is so dang good that I felt the same way. And I got to imagine even the other thing has to be like, geez, you went a little extra on this one. And the other money shot scene is, for me, the blood testing sequence. Because this is where that paranoia comes into play, where that suspicion comes into play. They've got flamethrowers turned on each other. People are bound, and they start to do this blood test to see whose blood will, if exposed to like a heated wire, will run away or just like burn like normal blood does. And at this point, there are some suspects, right? We're kind of looking at, okay, Gary, and it might be him. Childs has been acting contentious with MacReady, so we feel like maybe there's something there. Even the Windows character, he ran to go grab a gun earlier. So there's a lot of different characters. Stoner Palmer, all of a sudden, his blood goes crazy, and he just sits there and starts shaking and rattling and gets ready to turn to thing while everyone is bound right next to him. That is terrifying. I think that is the scariest part of this film for me, is imagining, because if I'm fighting a monster and I've got a flamethrower in my hand, that's one thing. If I'm fighting a monster and I'm bound in a chair sitting right next to that monster, and it has the ability to change shape and eat me, and I don't, that's night terror territory. So I thought that was incredibly effective. That was a scene that you had mentioned up front too, where they intentionally didn't shine the same lights into that Palmer's eyes so that they would look a little flatter, so that we would subconsciously pick up on something being different there. What's crazy about that sequence, though, is they didn't do that throughout the entire movie. And so a lot of people will now look at other scenes in the movie and say, oh, there wasn't enough reflection here, therefore it was that. If Carpenter's come back and just said, like, no, that's just the way the light worked in that. It's like, it's a movie from 1982 where we didn't have as many touch-up effects to do, and it doesn't have the same screen resolution, and kind of what we got with the lighting was what we got, because once we shot it, we had to put it on a barge and ship it to go protect the film so it wouldn't get exposed to the elements. So there are scenes where there's just not that same reflection that has nothing to do with whether someone is or is not infected. But because it was in that one scene, it's become part of the mythology, the fabric, the urban legend of the film. And it's why we're still talking about this film today. It's why we're still speculating and guessing, is because of that desire that we have to try to guess and figure out what really happened.
There's still so much. And of course, the ending that leaves McCready and Childs as the last two living beings at the base camp, you're not really sure, well, are they both infected? Is McCready infected? Is Childs infected? I mean, Childs was missing for the last sequence of the film. McCready, you didn't actually see him get out of the explosion in one piece. You just saw the explosion that, destroyed the majority of the base and presumably the creature. And there they are, just both kind of slowly freezing to death in a burning camp with a bottle of whiskey between them. And, what's in the bottle? Somebody had the rumor that there was gasoline in there, and that's how you know that Childs is actually it. But when did he switch the bottles? When did McCready have a chance to switch the bottle? They both drank from it.
And even if he did, these are monsters that have like the kind of the memories, and like, it would be like, oh no, this is gasoline.
And all it takes is one cell. So what if McCready was the one infected? He left a cell of himself in the bottle. The bottle went to Childs, and now Childs is infected. So we don't know. And you can't know, although Carpenter has stated that he does, and that's, means that the speculation will go on forever, probably until
glad
he
that
actually
he
gives
knows, but I hope I sincerely hope he takes it to his grave. I have like kind of a secret love for a very specific type of movie, and it's the ambiguous ending movie, right? Because I have an answer to the is it A or is it B question that usually comes with those things, which is and it's sort of pat. It's a little underwhelming, but I think it gets to the heart of why I love these so much. My answer is sort of C. It doesn't matter which one in this particular case. It doesn't matter if they're both human or if one of them is a monster at this point, because at this point, the damage has been done. What we know is the paranoia has gotten to the point that all they have left is this one moment of not quite knowing for sure before they potentially die or they potentially turn on each other. If they're human and they just sit there and freeze to death because in this moment of paranoia they can't trust each other, that's tragic. If the fact that one of them is a monster and consumes the other one as soon as the film ends, that's tragic. And I think that's what works so well for me. The not knowing of it makes that tragedy all the more insightful. It's the same thing where, like, at the end of Inception with, like, is the top spinning or is it falling over? It doesn't matter, because at this point he's chosen his family life as opposed to kind of like being stuck inside of this dream life. There's certain things that that resonates so well with me with this type of films. Yeah, I love speculating about it. I love reading about it too. I love reading the gasoline stories. I read one earlier where someone was talking about if you look at the jacket that Childs is wearing, it is a slightly different color blue than when he's standing there guarding at the end, and so that means that he grabbed the jacket after being consumed by Blair, who snuck in behind him, and now there's a lot of those things, and I think those are fun thought exercises, but I also never want to ever find out if any of those are true.
Absolutely. And ultimately, it doesn't really matter if somebody, if people in the audience don't get that answer, because you don't need it to enjoy it. And you don't need it to feel that frustration and that need for you to go back and rewatch it to try and get more clues. I mean, it's all part of the enjoyment of this film, which brings me to the point that with all the work that went into this film, I was reading a contemporary interview with John Carpenter where he was just loving how much support he had from the studio in making this film. There was a lot of movement on this movie from when they first started pitching it back in 76 to when he was brought on, and everybody working on it. All the work that they put in on the Universal Studio lot in the hottest summer in LA history at that point, where people were walking around in parkas because they had to create sort of like a cold set to film all of the interiors and all of that and get breath going. So it was a cold area, and they would walk outside and it'd be 120 degrees with like the tour buses going by going, what are these nutcases doing in parkas? So everybody got sick and all of that. But, all of the work that got put into this. There's a story that Adrienne Barbeau tells in The Greatest Geek Year Ever, where she and John go on vacation after the film is, it's set to print, and it's going to be coming out in a few weeks. They go on vacation, they come back, and they land in Florida, and what's on the cover of People magazine but E.T.?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And he looks at that, looks at her, and says, that's it. We're done for. Because 2 weeks before the thing opened, E.T. opened to be the latest summer blockbuster by Steven Spielberg, the latest feel-good, everybody can enjoy this wonderful, lovely, friendly alien film. And then 2 weeks later, a horror movie about an evil alien that takes over people in very disgusting ways opens. It wasn't a complete bomb, but it got critically panned, trashed for being just like a disgusting movie. Nobody wanted to see this, who's gonna want to come and see this movie, but sickos who want to see like some really disgusting effects. And
yay for sickos. Yay
for sickos.
Yeah.
Sickos.
Yeah.
But unfortunately it almost killed his career. Poor John Carpenter. Like, the movie just did not do well. It did make its budget back, but barely. And he really felt terrible that he had put so much into this, and doors closed after it just did not do well. And I think it's only the benefit of time and video, home movie channels on cable, things like that. That gave this film legs and gave this film a fan base that's done nothing but grow over the past 40 years and cement that legacy. But man, I mean, if you talked to John Carpenter in 1983 and said, "Hey, so what do you think about making more movies?" He probably would have looked at you and said, like, "What? Who's going to give me that? Like,
no monsters and none in the snow after that.
No more monsters. No, just I want to do like My Friend Flicka 5, like just
But
I'll just sit here and make music because that's all I'll do.
It's part of this like lineage too, because part of what was able to get this green lit was of course we had Ridley Scott's Alien from before, and even the poster, the amazing Drew Struzan poster, which I think is great. Apparently Carpenter wasn't a fan of at the time. He's like, oh, this looks like a cheesy slasher, but I think he came around on it. They changed the tagline to say the ultimate in alien horror because they wanted to get that alien in there, because they wanted people to remember that. So it's interesting that this comes in this like from Alien to E.T. to The Thing, and then also around the same time we have Ridley Scott's Blade Runner getting also critically panned, like didn't do super well around the same time. So there's something about
Opened on the
like,
same day. It opened on the same day as The Thing.
and two movies that I would put in my Hall of Fame, if not my Mount Rushmore, right? You know, like it just in terms of overall kind of sci-fi or horror movies. And to know that they've obviously benefited from time and reevaluation. And I do definitely think that like that particular era was also around the same time as like the VHS boom. So you started to see, you know, I told my stories about kind of growing up in like the late 80s, early 90s, going to rental stores. But I think a lot of people also have that around the time that they, you know, could go to their local video store and rent movies like this or cheesy slashers or what have you. But at the same time, I do feel that, yeah, I feel like the VHS boom has got to be a big part of why we're still talking about these movies today.
Absolutely. Without the legs that it had at home, it could have just easily have been in the theater and gone within a month or two, and then that's it. No more John Carpenter's The Thing, and probably no more John Carpenter career, at least for a long time. But because, you know, depending on the release dates, it probably was not released on VHS until at least a year afterwards, so 83, maybe 84. And then, of course, to the home movie channels. But just being able to watch it at home allowed people who had seen it and enjoyed it for what it was to then introduce other people to it, but then also to have kids and their moms discovering it with a really cool box at their local video store and taking it home and being pleasantly shocked, surprised, thrilled, scared, and blown away by the effects. Just, you know, this film really, it's kind of a testament to cult status and the power of sort of a cult of fandom to give a film second life. But it is still shocking to me that people in 82 didn't appreciate what they were seeing, or at least put so much weight to the critics opinions that they stayed away in droves.
It's part of why one of my favorite things to do is to champion sort of like indie horror movies. I do the festival circuit when and where I can, and specifically for genre films. And so I seek out these films that don't have crazy distribution, or maybe still seeking distribution, or maybe they do, but it's like, you know, they're not going to play like Marvel theaters, you know, they're going to play a few theaters here and there. I'm always wondering and looking for like what the next version of this is for me. And for me, I've had that experience with seeing kind of like early screenings of like, you know, Robert Eggers movies between The Witch and so on from there, and Ari Aster from Hereditary into Midsommar. Even say a filmmaker named Matty Doe, who did a series of films, Chantilly, Dearest Sister, and I believe The Long Walk is the last one. Who I would never have become a super fan of had I not sought out these sort of films that weren't playing at the multiplex. And so I think that's one of my favorite takeaways to tell people, like when we have these conversations about things, we talk about the thing right now as though it is in a museum, right? Because that's the experience that we have right now. That wasn't the experience when it came out. And it took people who became rabid super fans of this to sort of elevate this to the point where we could talk about this. So I encourage people from a film perspective, if anyone ever says, man, all they make is sequels and remakes and franchise films, yeah, there's a ton of those. But there are literally hundreds of original films being produced and created and distributed every single year. And you may not be able to always find them, especially if you have like maybe a 4-screen multiplex in your area. You know, some areas it's harder to track things down, but with streaming and other platforms like that, just take a chance and watch some new original stuff, because you might be watching The Thing and not know it.
Right. And, you know, to your point about, they don't do anything but like sequels and remakes. John Carpenter's The Thing was a remake.
It's a remake!
It was a remake of The Thing from Another World, or The Thing, which was from the 50s. So this movie was a remake of a 30-year-old picture that had, a group of scientists that were stuck in a base with a giant sort of Frankenstein vegetable monster picking them off. But, you know, if somebody complains about a remake,
which itself, by the way, was an adaptation of John Campbell's Who Goes There.
Absolutely.
So we're sort of 3 layers deep.
Exactly. So it's it's an adaptation, a remake, and even going with the idea, we can, there's no originality in Hollywood. There's no, everything's a remake, everything's an adaptation. Why don't we just go back to the original? You can read the original story anytime. It's still there. Nobody got rid of it. It's still there. If you want to see the original, The Thing, you can still see it. It's out there. It's easily accessible. But sometimes magic happens when new eyes, new actors, new interpretations of, old favorites happen. And this is one of them. And I think that for the people who did trek to their local screens in July of '82, after coming off the high of, seeing E.T. for the 8th time, and they did enjoy watching this visceral, messy, gory, but also just so well written and so well paced film, to appreciate it for what it was back then. I thank them for evangelizing the rest of the world afterwards, because this would have been a tragedy if it had been lost to time, or just relegated to sort of a bargain bin idea that it was a remake of a remake. It was a remake of an adaptation, whatever. But yeah, this was such a great film, and I love talking about it with you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
No, this is absolutely a blast. Like I said, I enjoy horror movies so much. Like, this is, it's my jam, so, and it's yours too. So being able to, and talk about this, in the same way, I know off panel, we do a lot of comic book chat with one another as well, but being able to come here and talk about movies together is so much fun. So thank you for having me. This was so cool.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll definitely be talking again in the future. I'm sure there's some other movies that you'd like to introduce me to, or just squee with me about, because we both love it. So can't wait for those two.
My letterboxed floweth over, so yeah, we've got some good options.
It does. If you have letterboxed, check out Will's lists and everything, and his reviews and everything. There's so much there. But speaking of, you've just listened to another episode of the Bear Cave of Terror, and if you haven't seen John Carpenter's The Thing, or after listening to us are struck with an irresistible compulsion to watch it again, it is streaming for free on Tubi. And it was most recently available on Peacock, and it'll probably be again in the near future, especially for Halloween coming up pretty soon. But in the meantime, it's easily available digitally and on physical media. Remember physical media? Yeah.
Yeah.
And Will, if listeners would like to get in touch, or listen to more or read more from you, how would they do that?
Yeah, there's a couple different places. So the podcast that I co-host with my hosts Brad and Jim is Movie Bears Podcast. So check us out. We have what we do is we generally live stream our episodes, so you can see them both on Facebook Live and on YouTube. So just look for Movie Bears Podcast there. Typically, when we record, usually it's Tuesday nights. So if you're kind of file that away and look for us on one of those nights. But then those become an edited version that's released through the normal podcatcher of choice, or Spotify. So just look through those things. And also we have a website, moviebearspodcast.com. For anything involving me, of course, I'm on the normal social media platforms, but Steve and I were talking about the one that's probably most applicable here. Just look for @TheMovieBear on Letterboxd. If you're not on Letterboxd, you should be if you're a film fan. It's a great place to connect with other film fans, to review films, to make lists of films, to sort of see what other people are thinking about films you might be watching. I've been on the platform now for 12 years, which is a long time. And so that's part of why I've got that huge backlog of reviews there. So give me a follow there. I'd love to follow you back and find out the type of stuff that, if you're listening to this and there's something that you're enjoying, I want to follow you and find out what your lists are so that I can catch up on some of your favorite movies. So yeah, let's connect on socials and check out our show.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And you can also follow me or the show on the Bear Cave of Terror on Blue Sky and Instagram Bear Cave of Terror, or send an email to bearcaveofterror@gmail.com. A list of sources that we used for this are going to be available in the show notes if you'd like to learn more or see more about John Carpenter's The Thing. There is a new documentary that's coming out next year that'll be released in 2026. So there's still more that's coming out on this. It has a lot of legs. So good night. And always make sure to stash your shredded underwear better next time you assimilate an unsuspecting Antarctic research scientist so the rest of the poor sods don't catch on. Take care, everyone.
The gods, man. They practically own South America. I mean, they taught the Incas everything they know.